Krampus is a 2015 horror movie from Michael Doherty about a strained family lodged up together on Christmas Eve during a massive snowstorm, who soon become the target of Krampus, a horned anti-Santa from European folklore who actually predates Saint Nick. Merry Christmas from all of us at Rocklin Graves. Thanks for joining me this month as we've looked at a number of different movies to watch during the holiday season to help get you in the spirit, and to top it off, I could think of no better movie than Krampus. There are plenty of festive horror movies, and some, like Black Christmas, would easily make a list of my all-time favorite movies, but Krampus stands right beside it as essential viewing during the Christmas season. Michael Doherty made a name for himself in the world of horror with Trick or Treat, which is one of two movies that I watch every Halloween night and probably will for the rest of my life. He spawned what has essentially become the face of Halloween with Sam, and when he received a holiday e-card featuring Krampus, he described it as love at first sight. Work on the film started in 2011 when he teamed up with Zach Shields and Todd Casey to get the story in order, and filming took place from March to May of 2015, and it eventually released on December 4th of that year, the day before Krampusnacht, the night before the feast of St. Nicholas, where the beast wanders the streets. Out of all the Christmas horror movies there are, Krampus and Black Christmas are the ones that I cherish the most, so let's cheers to this wonderful time of year and enjoy one of the coziest days together with this gem of a film.
All right, but don't you rat me out.
It's extremely important to open your film by establishing a tone and setting the stage for the story to unfold on. So for this one, it's imperative that we really feel the Christmas spirit frame one. Thankfully, Doherty managed to bribe a Best Buy manager to give him security footage of the store during holiday season, so right away you can feel that Christmas spirit shooting out of the TV and directly into your bloodstream like the IV tubes many of these shoppers are going to be on as they cling to the new toaster they got for 65% off after prying it from the cold, dead hands of a single mother who wanted her kids to experience bread that exceeded room temperature for the first time. And I mean, isn't that what Christmas is really all about? I do genuinely appreciate how much attention was given to this opening scene. There's just a lot of fun details, from this woman smashing someone in the head with a skateboard, the security guards having a bit too much fun tasing two people who I'm pretty sure are already incapacitated, and this kid just being absolutely mortified by Santa Claus as she tries to escape and he just holds on. If these aren't the faces of the holidays as an adult, then I don't know what are. Allow me to ask you a question. What's the best film adaptation of A Christmas Carol? I'll give you a moment, but there is only one correct answer.
I'd like to warn you that you will be visited by three spirits. What?
Hell yeah, you got it! Brian Desmond Hurst's 1951 classic starring Alistair Sim is truly the greatest adaptation of this heartfelt and thought-provoking Christmas tale. Sim gives one of my favorite performances ever. It's got a dense atmosphere to it. It's just the creme de la creme. Hey, fuck you, Adam Scott! Despite what other excuse the movie tries to give for why things go a little off the rails later on, please know that this whole thing is Adam Scott's fault because he turned off that flawless movie without even letting Omi get halfway through while she baked cookies. Not only that, but he switched it to the news and then just walked away. Do that in my house and you'll see what fucking happens. Young Max here is holding on strong to the Christmas spirit, which is what led him to get into a fight with the kid that he was sparring with in the opening scene.
He even told the first graders that Santa was just a cheap marketing ploy and invented to sell Pepsi. Coke. You know what I mean?
I actually do really love how Omi and Max are set up as being the only ones really hanging on to the magic of Christmas right from the beginning, and the rest of the family seems to be nowhere near it.
I thought you said you weren't working over Christmas.
I said no traveling over Christmas. I still have to take a few calls.
This is obviously the most reprehensible example of that, but it's sadly all around them, which makes it a hell of a lot harder to enjoy. Krampus deals with that feeling of hanging on to the childhood wonder of Christmas while everyone around you seems to have shed it a long time ago a hell of a lot better than you might expect. It can be a hard time of year, especially for Santa Claus, who's apparently being neglected by Mrs. Claus. I'd wager a guess that it may have something to do with his caloric intake after having billions of servings of milk and cookies every year for the last several hundred, and I don't blame her. It's time for an intervention. Alright, with this shot, I can't wait any longer to talk about how visually pleasing this movie is. Doherty is no slouch when it comes to making sure his movies reflect the time they're set during. Trick or Treat was absolutely teeming with Halloween atmosphere thanks to the dense decorations, varied jack-o'-lantern designs, and steady fog, and Krampus shows off an equal amount of care for setting and tone and immersing you in its world. The sets are all decorated so beautifully, but it's not just that makes the movie so nice to look at, it's also the stellar lighting and color grading that gives off one of the strongest Christmas vibes in a movie from a visual standpoint. To add on to that, the transition from these cozy Christmas scenes full of welcoming warmth to the frigid cold scenes outside after the storm hits is as smooth as butter. And they also did a fantastic job at capturing the isolated look and feel of being snowed in with no power. This shot alone fully sold me on the movie the first time I saw it. If Dad's sitting alone drinking in his office, that can only mean one thing. The extended family is about to arrive. I'm right there with you. Something that Krampus handles pretty damn well is the family dynamic between these two wildly different groups of people, but it does take a little while before you get over just wanting to stomp on everyone's head. This dinner scene is important for establishing some of the relationships, but it feels a bit forced to have the cousins steal Max's Santa letter and just read it all out while mocking him for it without any of the adults stopping this from happening.
I wish my mom and dad could fall in love again.
This interaction could have happened while the kids were away from their parents, and that would have made it feel more believable, but I mean, they also kind of wrote themselves into a corner with this method of revealing information because the parents all need to hear what Max wrote in his wish list.
I wish things weren't so hard for Uncle Howard and Aunt Linda.
There is some give and take here, but I feel like there just could have been a more believable way of revealing this.
I just wanted Christmas to be like it used to be, but forget it. I hate Christmas! I hate all of you!
With his Christmas spirit out the window, he tears his letter up and tosses it to the winds, which kicks off this really cool sequence where the pieces float up towards the moon and a raging storm is born, knocking out all of the power in the area and leaving Max's house for last, almost like something saying, "You." There's a great use of visual storytelling with the color temperature changes in this part of the movie, where we have this overly bright, almost performative look to everything before it all goes off the rails when Max's letter seems to usher in a storm that knocks away the facade and leaves everyone in this dead cold. Omi lights up a fire, and once Beth goes missing and the warring family needs to come together and find her and eventually stand up against what's coming, there's a much more genuine warmth brought on by the soft candlelight and roaring fireplace. I have no idea if that was intentional or an unconscious decision, or if I'm just reading way too much into it, but I felt like it did a really good job at portraying the state that the family's in throughout the movie, where they start off trying to fake getting along for the sake of the holiday, then get knocked out of that and see the cold division between them before they start to join up and fight together, using their differences and respective experiences to create something much stronger than the sum of their parts. Regardless of whether or not it was intentional, it works. Speaking of Beth going missing, Sarah, being the responsible parent that she is, allowed Beth to walk a few blocks to check on her boyfriend who wasn't texting her back in the middle of a blizzard. Goddamn kids and their goddamn cell phones. You know, I suppose I didn't have to actually spike the eggnog. I could have just had regular eggnog and, well, it'll make the video more interesting. The first 25-ish minutes of the movie show almost no signs of this being anything but a normal Christmas movie, which is what I think sets it apart for me when compared to some of the others. A lot of Christmas horror is your standard horror movie with a Christmas paint job on it. There's nothing wrong with that at all, but what I find makes Krampus work so well during the season is that it genuinely does feel like a Christmas movie in its setup and how it handles its themes. It just so happens that gingerbread cookies try to kill people with nail guns. We'll get back to that. This is very much formatted like a standard Christmas movie, and honestly, someone could watch it up to this point and not have any clue that it's a horror movie. At least until Beth is walking to Derek's house and the light changes right quick, indicating that something's about to go down. Now you want to talk atmosphere. The second act of this movie is teeming with this cold, dark vibe that was the thing that originally sold me on it when I first saw the movie. I mean, just look at this. Doherty is so good at this kind of thing. My favorite visual in the movie comes during this sequence when Beth hears distant sleigh bells jingling away in the liminal snowy streets. She turns around after hearing a loud thud on a rooftop and sees the dark and hazy outline of a tall, cloaked figure with horns who starts running along the rooftop like that random shit you imagined as a kid while looking out the window of a driving car. This is the perfect reveal for Krampus, granting the beast this cold, dark introduction that leaves so much up to your imagination and almost feels like a dream. I love howls. I'm a sucker for howls. Give me movies where shit howls into the night. Beth takes refuge under a DHL truck where the frozen, mortified face of the delivery driver from earlier greets her through a window. It's not just Krampus that they need to worry about though, as we get introduced to the first of many minions that I'll be gushing about very soon. I adore pretty much everything about this sequence. It makes use of the isolated feeling of a heavy snowstorm to build up an unsettling vibe before revealing Krampus in the absolute best way possible, and then setting up the minions, and Beth's disappearance is the thing that kickstarts the gradual bonding between the rest of the family. That dynamic is something that I find Krampus handles really well. Not from the perspective that the characters are incredibly fleshed out or you feel like super invested in them or anything, but what I find to work so well about the family is how their differences are handled. It's really clear from the first interaction that the extended family is more right-leaning than Max's parents and his sister are, and it's pretty cartoony for a while.
Well, the only survival training I need is my old smoke pole and a big fat box of buckshot that I keep out in that truck.
Not to say it hurts the movie or anything, it actually fits the tone quite well, but it does take a bit of time before the movie takes these characters more seriously. You might assume that by the end, some of them may change their views or at least ease up on some of their more questionable statements.
We said no gun talk at the dinner table.
This family needs a little gun talk, whether it's at the dinner table or anywhere else. You know what I'm saying?
But that's not the case. The family uses their unique life experiences to each offer up something that will help them in finding Beth and eventually warding off Krampus and its minions, like Howard being heavily armed at Christmas and Tom having survival training from Eagle Scouts, two things that the other had their reservations about earlier on, but which eventually become really helpful assets, especially when they're used in conjunction. They don't really get into politically charged conversation or anything like that, but their differing worldviews are really apparent, and they do butt heads over how things should be handled. What makes this all work so well is that they don't really change their views on the world, which is a hell of a lot more of a realistic way of portraying family dynamics than having huge shifts in perspective. You're not always going to agree or get along with family, but you are ultimately stuck with one another a lot of the time, and finding ways to make that work despite your differences is how you get shit done. Overall, worldviews remain the same, but at a certain point you have to just put that aside and try and find common ground. And the way this movie portrays that works really well, and is also a big part of the reason that Krampus feels first and foremost like a Christmas movie. Those themes of family are the top priority in this story. So, what about the sentient gingerbread men? That's what we're all here for at the end of the day. Well, the movie does take a long while and a slower pace, and there's about a 15-minute stretch midway through that I always find drags on a little bit. It feels like everything's been established, and then we're sort of just sitting still without much new being introduced until this kid's lured to the fireplace by a hanging gingerbread cookie, like me falling for Bloodborne PC rumors every single fucking time. He gets dragged up through the chimney in a reverse Santa Claus, prompting Omi to finally open up about something from her childhood. It's been fairly obvious since the start that she's aware of something the rest of them aren't, and the sequence where we learn what that backstory is so insanely cool. It's a CGI animation made to resemble stop motion, and it injects the feeling of old folklore into the story so well, while also just being an absolute treat to look at. Omi was in a similar position as Max when she was younger, and wound up wishing away her parents, to which the demon Krampus obliged her by showing up on Christmas Eve and taking them away.
He left me as a reminder of what happens when hope is lost.
The animation here is absolutely beautiful and is a really great way to acknowledge the folklore of Krampus from its cultures of origin, and Omi's voice is so damn soothing that it makes me want a commentary track from her on the whole movie.
Krampus came not to reward, but to punish.
Well, you know, we've talked for a long while now about family relationships and atmosphere and historical elements. How's about we get to the gingerbread men with nail guns? Well, the assault from Krampus's army begins by taking one of the cousins, so the fight between them and the family begins in the attic. It's immediately apparent just how much love and attention was poured into the designs of these things. We have Weta Workshop to thank for bringing them to life in such vivid detail, and I guess Doherty must have been just as into them as I am.
The producer might have quite often wondered where Michael had disappeared to, and he was down back at the Weta Workshop playing with the puppets, which is fantastic for us.
The bonus features are well worth a watch, by the way, at least on the release that I have here from Scream Factory. There's so much behind the scenes footage and a ton of great interviews showcasing the fantastic work from everyone involved, and it's really cool to see how much these sets transformed for the movie. Lots and lots of passion here, which is no surprise for Doherty. The movie kind of just lets loose for a little while because it knows you've been waiting for a turning point, but the risky part of this sequence is the very quick tonal shift that comes with it. The first time I saw this movie, I was actually a little disappointed because of how the very dark and eerie tone was built up, and then it gets so over the top and crazy that I felt like that vibe that I was in got broken. The more I've seen the movie though, the more I've grown to appreciate this huge tonal shift because it allows for a mixture of that ominous tone and a more fun movie baked into one, which I also feel like fits the setting of Christmas horror movies really well. It does make sense here, but it could definitely turn someone away if they were into what the movie was going for before this. Giving me flashbacks to Resident Evil Village. My favorite bit here is easily the gingerbread man attacking Howard with a nail gun. They're just animated really well, and I always have a huge smile on my face here. I'm a pretty big sucker for this kind of thing. Things just get worse and worse for the family from here on out, and Aunt Dorothy faces her fate like a champ. So long as they have peppermint schnapps, I'm sure she'll be fine. Also, one of the best lines in the movie comes here right before Howard gets taken.
Twisted fairy tale horseshit!
In an act of badass heroism that shows she really is the dopest grandma on the planet, Omi stays behind as the family decides they've no choice but to run, so she can face the demon that took her family from her as a child head on. And this is where we get our first proper look at the insane design of Krampus. Sacrifice is an important part of this story. It'll come back around in a few minutes, but Omi is sacrificing herself because she knows that she'll just weigh the family down in her old age. There's so much cool shit to soak in here, but the biggest thing is definitely this macabre Santa mask the Beast wears, and we never really see what it actually looks like. Omi knows what she's in for, but she doesn't miss a beat. So, with a movie structured with such a bizarre shift in tone into the third act, how the hell do you end this thing? Well, everyone else gets taken except for Max, and now it's time to really come full circle on the Christmas themes, but like a little more metal, because Max decides to sacrifice himself for his family. God, if you're just looking for something aesthetically pleasing, this movie's got so much to offer. When the response to Max's self-sacrifice is all around laughter, he gets dropped into the hell pit, and then wakes up in his bed on Christmas morning. A lovely, dreamy tone greets him on this fine day, and he makes his way downstairs where everyone else has already gathered to wait for Max so they can open presents. It's all nice and good. Aunt Dorothy's nursing her hangover in the most effective way, and Max hugs his family in their collective newfound Christmas spirit. However, one of Max's presents is a familiar bell with a familiar name inscribed on it, and everyone freezes like they've been reminded of something they can't quite remember. We then zoom out to reveal Krampus holding a snow globe and looking in on these fine folks before he places it on a shelf in a really cool looking set full of countless other snow globes. So what actually happened here? There are a number of theories, but there is actually a definitive answer to what happened according to the graphic novel adaptation of the movie. If you have an idea of what this ending means to you and you don't want that changed, I'd recommend skipping to the conclusions chapter because I'm going to talk about the canonical ending now. It wasn't what I thought happened, so I get it. Apparently what happened here is that Max's sacrifice truly did work, and Krampus spared the entire family. He showed a renewed love of family, something that goes hand in hand with the Christmas spirit, and choosing to give his own life for those he loved granted them all a second chance. They're not trapped inside of the snow globe in a sort of limbo where Krampus keeps all of those it's taken. These are a way to watch over those who've passed the test, for lack of a better word, and make sure they never lose the spirit again, lest Krampus comes to them again. He leaves the bell as a reminder of what's at stake. It's a happier ending than the theory that they're trapped in the globes, which is how I interpreted it the first go through, and you might think a darker ending makes more sense for a horror movie, but to me this ending solidifies that the movie really is a Christmas movie first and horror second, and it's great from that perspective.
Squirrels.
Right. Probably playing with their nuts.
So that's Krampus. It's become a staple of the season for me since I saw it for the first time, and I think I wind up liking it more every time I see it. There's a lot of heart and warmth to it that makes it a great pick for this time of year, but it also mixes in some fantastic dark fantasy and beautifully creepy visuals to satiate my constant need for horror. There's a lot of humor in the movie, and for me at least, it works well, always getting a few chuckles out of me, even on rewatches.
You kids don't have a damn bit of patience. When I was your age, I didn't hear from my boyfriend for 2 years while he was off fighting Charlie.
Doherty's made 2 movies now where a festive figure goes after those who've lost the spirit, and If you ask me, he's 2 for 2 on making a damn good time out of it. Looks like Max might have also had a visit from Sam at some point. This kid needs to get better at holiday spirit. Save for a bit of dragging in the midpoint, it's a really fun time that'll stay in the annual rotation. There we have it. That's gonna call it for the Christmas season over here at Rocklin Graves, and I've really enjoyed going over these festive horror movies over the last month. I'll be ranking all of the horror movies I saw this year in my next video, and then in January, I'll be kicking off with a franchise I've been getting a lot of requests to cover, which I'm super excited to dive into. Until then, thank you for stopping by Rocklin Graves. I hope you've enjoyed your stay.